All right. Thank you so much for joining us today and for our panel discussion, Brands on a Mission, Collaboration for a Cause. I'm so happy to have panelists here today with us. I'm not going to introduce them right now, as I know that they're going to go through that themselves, but I would like to introduce Constance Beverly, who is CEO of the Share Winter Foundation, who is going to be moderating this conversation for us. So Constance, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. I always feel bad when people have to throw my name in there. It's a long one. It's a lot of letters. Again, hi, I'm Constance. I'm here to lead you through Brands on a Mission, Collaboration for a Cause. Basically, your consumers want to know where you stand, particularly in the past 12 to 18 months. A lot has happened and a lot of conversations about social impact have come about. But how do you authentically demonstrate your commitment to community and to social justice? So our panelists here today are going to join us in a discussion about how to collaborate and communicate your brand's authentic commitment to social change. We have some amazing panelists whose companies and life's work have been very purpose and mission driven, and they've found ways to interact with their communities in order to give back in an authentic and impactful way. Joining us today are Stefan Jacob from Cotopaxi, Ashley Miller from Evo, and John Salinger from Empowered. I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves because they're fascinating, and I'd talk about each of them for hours if you'd let me. But I'm going to kick it over to John to get us started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company.
Sure. I'm a human being from New York. I am the founder of Empowered. Empowered is a B Corp and a benefit corporation. So we're a for-purpose organization, and we sell solar, Pico lanterns and chargers globally. The more we sell to the developed world retail market and corporate and direct-to-consumer market, the better we can afford to reduce margins and build capacity into emerging markets, South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central and South America, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia. We work with 700 NGOs and nonprofits, and we're really excited to be here. We've impacted 4 million lives to date that did not have access to clean electricity. And we've actually averted about 2.8 million tons of CO2. And that's just to emerging markets. So if anyone here on this panel or anyone who has DC current, we don't measure that. So we've had a really strong environmental impact. The last thing I'll say, not about myself, is that we're only 14 people. So we're really proud of those numbers. We've basically utilized the power of consumers in order to help provide tools to those that need it elsewhere.
Amazing. I'm going to kick this over to Ashley from Evo.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. I'm Ashley Miller. I use she, her pronouns and manage community impact at Evo or evo.com. We're an action sports and lifestyle retailer headquartered in Seattle on Duwamish Coast Salish land. And our purpose is to make life better by building community and igniting the adventurous spirit that lives within us all. Our community impact team works to identify ways to internalize and embody that purpose. And so we do that through strategic philanthropy, a really robust volunteerism program, sustainability, equity, diversity, inclusion, and really thinking about ways to steward Evo culture, both for our team, as well as our customers and vendor partners. Our intention is to build deep and authentic relationships with community organizations that allow us to be in a real partnership with the folks who are doing the work on the ground. And our giving generally looks like operating support. But when it's really effective, I think that we create conversation and space to understand the unique ways that Evo can help partners fill gaps. So 2 really quick examples of that I'm proud of are that at the beginning of the pandemic, we had calls with our deepest relationship organizations across the country to understand how they were pivoting, how their communities were being impacted by the pandemic. And for one of them, for SOS, they were really looking at a shift in virtual programming that allowed us to pilot a paid internship program for their alumni. So in September, we launched a 6-week paid retail internship at our Denver store for 2 participants, which at the end, they actually were both hired on. And I'm just thrilled about that and the model that we're working with SOS to create so that they can deepen their impact and do that with more companies and organizations. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we just launched a partnership that I'm just thrilled about with Share Winter. And we're working with amazing consultants at Rise with KJ to offer a 9-month cohort-based learning model for 31 youth organizations across the United States and Canada to address racial equity internally and systemically. And I'm sure you're gonna let me talk about that more, so I'll stop there, but I'm really happy to be here.
Well, absolutely. And I also realized I should have given a little background for those of you that do not know who or what Share Winter is. Share Winter is a grant-making organization that gives about $1 million a year to grassroots community organizations and nonprofits that work in communities to teach kids to ski and snowboard. We fund Nordic and Alpine skiing and snowboard programs for youth traditionally denied access. And we are working to create a more inclusive and welcoming winter sports community. So we get to work with a lot of companies and brands on innovative partnerships. And our big MO is it's not just about writing checks. So that's why it's such an interesting topic. And I'm going to kick this over to Stefan at Cotopaxi to talk about, his company and what they're doing. And then we'll bring it back to talk about real collaboration that's more than check writing.
Amazing. Thank you, Constance. So fun to be part of this panel. Really, really honored to be here with Ashley and John. Both of your organizations, I think, are doing amazing work. So really, really a pleasure to be a part of this conversation. Cotopaxi is an outdoor gear brand. We design, manufacture outdoor apparel, packs, sleeping bags, tents, the likes. I've been around for about 7 years. I'm one of the founders. My co-founder and I, we both have had experiences in the underdeveloped world. I was born in Germany and spent time, my wife is half Indonesian, so spent time in Southeast Asia working with a nonprofit organization that was dedicated to the elimination of child labor on the Indonesian archipelago. And that was a wonderful experience. The organization was run by true humanitarians who had a phenomenal operational skill set and tremendous impact on the ground in terms of taking kids from fishing platforms, factories, human trafficking situations back into their communities, into their schools, and at the same time doing the legislative work to pass anti-child labor legislation, both on the federal and municipal level. And so tremendous impact there. That experience also was really eye-opening for me personally, really held a mirror in front of my face in terms of the sheer luck of being born in an environment where I didn't have to worry about opportunity, really, right? Education, health, shelter, these things were just a given. And these families and their kids were simply born in a much harder place and had much harder choices to make. And that's really at the core, that experience is at the core of who we are as Cotopaxi, the idea to build a brand around the notion of sustainably alleviating poverty, sustainably partnering with incredible organizations in country to provide grants, long-term grants, to then do the work on the ground to help create opportunity where that was lacking. And so in our case, we do that through making sustainable gear, leveraging our supply chain in a way to uplift the communities where we make our products. And then we give 1% of our revenue and 100% of our customer donations to the Cotopaxi Foundation, which then partners with various organizations, primarily in the Americas.
I love all of this. Sorry, I'm just going to nerd out a little bit over it. So we had the benefit of speaking prior to this panel and really get to know the business models of each of these individual organizations. And one of the things that really struck me was that for each of you, the things that you're working on are embedded in your entire value chain. We do have 2 founders here who built companies around purpose and around giving back and integrating that holistically into their entire business model. And then, Evo has developed a very innovative branch of their company that actually focuses on community impact, which is really unique. So I'd love to talk to each of you about giving advice to those who are maybe stepping into this for the first time or thinking about community partnerships, how can they get the buy-in, and how do they navigate all of those trails to put it throughout the entire value chain? And I'll kick it right back to you, Stefan, because I think, you know, you've spoken on this before, and I think you have some really great advice.
Yeah. I think it's a great question that you ask, and I think a crucial one that needs to be at the very front and beginning of an impact journey for an organization. There's this term of greenwashing, right, which is prevalent in not just the outdoor industry, but in general, of organizations that are slapping off an impact program to their operations because that's what you do these days. And we will never speak ill of anybody trying to do good. I think that's fantastic and that's wonderful, but there is some risk in doing it in a way that is not tightly integrated into the fabric of the organization, into the DNA of the organization and all aspects of the value chain. And so it's more an experience share than advice, right? But we really tried in our case to put our impact first in all of our decisions, from how we source our products, how we select the partners where we manufacture our product, to create that alignment at that level, and the human alignment in terms of like how they run their organizations, how the mills are being run, all the way to how we then, you know, tell our product stories, interact with our customers, to have that impact lens permeate everything that we do. Like every package that goes out at Cotopaxi comes with a handwritten thank you card that's written by a refugee here in Utah, where we work with the IRC. The little details matter. And I think it needs to be that level of diligence, I think, is really important for the program to be perceived by customers and genuinely hold up to the scrutiny from the outside, that this is real, that it's genuine, and that it is not just something that's happening on the side.
I think you've just highlighted the critical difference between just blanket cause marketing and collaborating for an ongoing purpose. And internally and structurally, John, one of the things I found most fascinating was the distinction between B Corps and what's the other term that isn't so hot in the market?
Corporations.
Exactly. Would you explain why you chose to go that way and the teeth that has?
I'd love to. I'd also like to just add on to what Stefan said. I'd echo everything he says, including, you know, if there are larger companies, all the way to a fossil fuel company, if you can force a company to do good, you can be a vehicle for change as a good company. And then just one last point on your last question. To me, it's about what you're doing. Decide what you're doing first. Mm-hmm. And if you're solving a problem, a challenge where someone or an environmental issue is a challenge, well, then you're in the right space. Then you're doing something that I believe capitalism was set out to achieve. If someone's hungry, you give them food. If they're thirsty, you give them water. In our case, if they need electricity or power, that's what we do. I think that's capitalism. So when we talk about for purpose, I think sometimes we bucket ourselves. We're just companies that aren't necessarily, no offense, but adding fragrance, the 5th fragrance to a shampoo and marketing the heck out of that. What we're trying to do is actually resolve needs that people have and provide tools for solutions. So I just wanted to just make sure I got that in. Very briefly, a B Corporation is a wonderful organization that holds a ton of organizations to task. And you get rated on not only your internal organization, which I think is important, but even more importantly, externally, your footprint on the world. What are you doing? Because for us, I'm in Brooklyn, we're in Brooklyn, we have 14 people, we're okay. You know, at least now we are, well, the last couple of days. We're okay. But what really matters is how can we really help the planet? How can we really help people that could use our tools, our lights that you see here, in a more purposeful manner and in a way to build capacity to get out of natural disasters. A benefit corporation is one that is a structure. It's in your bylaws. It's one that basically says your shareholders can hold you accountable not just for profit and growth, but for impact as well. I believe that gives you leeway and protection. I believe that enables you to Do whatever you want to do with your company as long as you are holding accountable to that cause. And if someone ever down the line, Kellogg's, a big company, takes over your company, right? They have to go along with that, or they would face shareholders in the same way they would if they were being irresponsible about growth and profit. And I think benefit corporations is a wonderful way to align, what we value. Because right now in the stock market, I don't think that's exactly what we value.
So what a lot of people who are watching this may be thinking is it's really easy when you're a founder of a company starting something from scratch to bring inherent values and to set something up from the very beginning, either structurally, through your value chains, or from your initial inception. But what is it like to be an employee within a larger corporation, to have a voice and to find impact and start steering other employees and leadership in a direction for social change? And I think, Ashley, you're the resident expert on that. So I'd love to kick it over to you to address those issues.
Expert's a strong word. I'm a student. I'm a student.
We are all
indeed. It's a journey, not a destination. So I think it is useful to say that, like Stefan, our founder and CEO, Bryce Phillips, really recognized early the gap in opportunity, the privileges, systemic oppression that exist, and just the access to resources that not everyone has equally. And so from the beginning, we have had an ethos of giving back to community that really centered on young people. And I think we've been thinking, like, as we've grown, and I think that an important difference is that we do have we have Evo branded product, but it's a very small percentage of our total sales. So we're really working with other brands and vendors as a retailer. And there's some things we don't have control of, but the conversations that we're having right now are really like, what does it mean for us to internalize our purpose and values across our company? And we have just a tremendous opportunity here. And I think that we're really like deepening our understanding and analysis of what that means. And so part of, I think, your question for me is, making sure that as individuals and business leaders that we have a clear analysis of the impact of our business in our communities and on the world. And as we grow and deepen that analysis, that then we're starting to look with new critical eyes across our companies on where we can have greater impact. And that some of that change is going to be incremental. I think all of this work is culture change work, which is sometimes slow and trust-based. I think that there's so much around how do we change our behavior, and it's through practice. And so, as we're looking at our company, I think our philanthropy and volunteerism has been so strong, but we're really having an opportunity to think about sustainability, equity, diversity, inclusion in new ways. And I think part of that is identifying the right questions to be asking across all of the decisions we're making at our company. And I think that also doing that, not just from the top, but like inviting everyone to be a part of it, that while that's sometimes slower, it also creates an opportunity for our teams and communities to build leadership, have a deeper sense of purpose, feel more connected, and just generally happier at work. And it creates an opportunity for us to find the language that we can use to bring along our customers and vendors to learn publicly and be sharing that learning. And I think that's kind of part of the approach of Evo. So there are some things that I think we can really highlight and be super proud of, and a lot of ways that we're just continuing to learn and grow.
And I think one of the things that is so critical, like you said, is the learning the language and working from a place of trust. Each of the panelists here have worked with communities and built trust, which I think leads a lot to the authenticity of the work and the impact that you have. Would anyone like to share about an instance in building trust and how that has impacted either your philanthropy, your impact, or the way you communicate that impact the outside world in conjunction with your brand. I know everybody wants to say this, so I'm going to kick it back over to Stefan because we haven't heard from him in a minute.
Sure, yeah. So in the early days of the business, we took a stance on continuing to be supportive of and inclusive of refugees here in the United States, which at the time under the last administration it was a controversial situation to say the least. We felt strongly about that. We had at that time already a partnership with the IRC, International Rescue Committee, one of the largest nonprofit organization supportive of refugees, not just in the United States, but across the world in various camps. And we felt strongly that that was a part of who we were as a brand built around people. And it doesn't matter who you are, that we did not want to stay silently by when we felt the language was turning against that group. And we held an event together with Syrian refugees here in Utah, with great success in terms of the turnout, in terms of creating this moment of togetherness in a sea of strong voices to the contrary. And I think that solidified internally for our employees, for our customers, that this was real, that we were willing to step up. I think it helped build trust with our partner, the IRC, and internally for our employees. And so that was a beautiful moment, and that partnership has grown ever since. They're one of our key impact partners domestically here in the U.S. And one of our grantees. And so that was a wonderful moment. But obviously there's some risk associated every time you do something like that as well.
John?
Well, a lot of stories. I guess societally or internally, like we've done a lot of things with our platform, with our voice, that aren't necessarily core to our mission, but core to our humanity. This year, and incredibly important at this time, we gave everyone our own national holiday to vote. I think that was a very easy one for us. Then we pushed that out on our social platforms that if it's not going to be on a weekend or a time when all people from all economic status can vote, well, we're going to do that, and we urged other companies to do that. With refugees, a lot of advocacy, a lot of amicus briefs. We've done, we've redefined kind of our personal sort of lighting category. And I think a lot of companies have emulated us to have purpose. I'll give you one quick domestic story that's a little closer to us and very close to my heart. And every chance I get, I speak to this. So there's a little boy, a young man named Jaquil Jackson. And he was, this year actually, he became a CNN hero, a young wonder. I think he's 13, 14, doesn't matter. He's so young. He started when he was 8. This kid saw homeless people on the streets. His parents are incredible parents. They were community advocates, organizers. And he said, I want to do something about this. And so we decided through our GIVE program that is fully funded, because we're a business, by consumers, by corporations, et cetera, that we were going to take and deploy our lights to him. And he would give out blessing bags. He's given out tens of thousands of blessing bags. He's from the south side of Chicago. This is something that our CEO, Sunga Jung, and I believe very strongly in, that you want to help locally, you want to help across the world, but you want to help domestically. And I mean, this kid is incredible. And in these bags are essentials for people that are homeless. And homeless initiatives are not, I hate using this term, but they're not sexy to corporations, right? That's not something that corporations necessarily want to align to. But it's the same reason why we get lights to countries that the US might not want to align itself to politically. We may not talk about that, but we do everything we can to kind of humanize and be agnostic about our approach to help as many people as we can with our technologies. The stories are endless, but I think that's enough for now.
Ashley, you got to share a little bit, but I know that you've worked a lot in building trust with communities, particularly when you're working with young people and people that work with young people. You know, the next generation has a very critical eye, and rightfully so. They're also highly educated. How are you navigating that with your program partners? And maybe could you speak a little bit about the feedback loop that you have with your grantees and how that informs your philanthropy and social impact?
Oh, that's such a big and great question. And I think one thing I would like to acknowledge is just the opportunity that we have to tell really powerful stories. And I think that is a place where we are still growing and developing. And I'm really eager to understand how to tell ethical, authentic stories that are empowering and inspiring and educating and motivating. So all of those things, I think, I just want to name that we're still working on it. But also the relationships that we've had have really created opportunities for folks to give us powerful feedback. And I think that there are several examples of this, but one is as we've really started, like as our giving has grown, as our business has grown, our giving has grown, which has been really exciting and sometimes intimidating. I'm going to tell you that in the midst of a global pandemic, the outdoor industry, I think, has overall done quite well, and Evo is certainly a part of that success. And when we beat our business goals, my budget also gets a bonus. And this year, my bonus is 4 times my budget at the beginning of the year. And so I am right now really trying to understand how I intentionally and strategically invest those dollars with community and seeking community feedback and buy-in, asking questions of our grantees, of other foundations who are doing this work. And one of the spaces we found is that that communities of color have to be centered and prioritized in building power and allocating resources in this movement. And so in making the outdoors more inclusive, we need to center the folks who are doing that work and who have been most greatly impacted. And so a couple of years ago, we started tracking the organizations that we fund that are both have equity as a part of their mission, and as well as the organizations that are led by people of color, by BIPOC folks. And we set some like pretty easy goals at the beginning. And I'm really proud of how we've done that work, but part of that is like really having relational grant making. So we actually don't have an application-based model. Our grant making is all relationship and conversation. Certainly we're interested in outcome and measurement, but that's not where we are leading from. And so this year when folks were really making shifts around their programming, and so many of them actually were even moving towards direct services and not doing outdoor youth programming at all, we said that's fine. And in fact, we're giving you more money this year because we want to make sure that you're able to keep your doors open. And so just having general operating funds rather than really strict giving guidelines, I think that's been really important. Also, the feedback we've received around our marketing, like that, we have really internalized that. We still, again, have so much opportunity, but that is a huge area of investment and attention for us in this year and in the future. And I think just really thinking about, from my end, how are we ensuring that our behavior is matching our values just across the board? So how are we using our purpose, using racial equity as a lens for which we're making decisions across the board? I hope that answered your question.
It does. And it also leads to lots of other questions and head nods and stories, which is amazing because when you're really deeply in the work, this goes on forever. That highlight is something that's really critical in our grant making, and something that in transitioning from the corporate world, I think a lot of times we try to slap a corporate solution on a community problem, and we give communities things they didn't ask for, rather than identifying the problem and coming through, which is something that both John and Stefan have explained, that they were solving a community problem and bringing that into their value stream, which is what I'm going to toss out here as a moment to take notes: an effective collaboration for a cause. So in closing that first part of this, one of the big things that I know everyone is facing, we had a global pandemic and finally eyes on systemic issues that have been problems forever, but that consumers have finally stepped up and called all corporate leaders, all people with any sort of privilege to address. There are so many different causes, so many different things. We want sustainability, we want diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want pay equity, we want sustainable supply chains. But as a business, how do you prioritize where you focus your impact? I think it was John that said it: if you try to prioritize everything, you prioritize nothing. What advice do each of you have in centering yourself in the impact that you can do, and doing the work internally at your company to cover some of those other issues, even if they're not your core purpose? So John, I know you have some thoughts on this in both ways, so I'm going to kick it over to you.
Sure. So thank you. I think your impact has to be impactful. And so this year is a great example of that. Now, I don't think you should go too wide, obviously, and I think you need to make sure that you're responsible in what you're doing, that you know what you don't know, that you listen to the field, that you listen to those who actually have the needs that you're fulfilling, because not everything is intuitive. Most things are actually counterintuitive in terms of what people need. And if you don't listen, then you do not solve problems. But this year, and I'll kind of shift to the pandemic for a second, which obviously affected many communities more than others. We're in Brooklyn, we're in New York, where I think you are from, as you said earlier. This was the epicenter. And, we shifted our focus to message staying home. We shifted because we're an outdoor company, but there was a moment in time when we just knew. And if our public servants aren't doing it, then the private sector has an opportunity to do it. And so instead of a go bag, which we would usually have our light in, we asked for people to look at stay bags. We talked about, instead of going on long trips, air flight, et cetera, and travel, to figure out how they can potentially set up a little campground in their backyard and things like that. We moved our staff, right, to a remote office. That also helps the environment in terms of transportation and emissions, et cetera. And so for us, internally, we kept our employees. We didn't do any furloughs. There were no reductions in pay. These are the kind of small inequities that people don't see necessarily, but larger organizations say, okay, there's a pandemic, I can't afford it, I'm gonna cut employees. And it is what it is. And so I think this year, although this is not around our core mission, our positioning as a B Corp and a benefit corporation, we were forced to do the right thing, or we forced ourselves to do the right thing. And the last thing I'll say is, it is important to react to your environment at hand. So if you don't react to the refugee crisis, if you don't react to environmental issues, then you're part of the problem, actually, at this point. And consumers have an amazing amount of power in terms of who they end up purchasing from. And you can vote for a candidate in the political spectrum that has your self-interest in mind, but you should. But you should also buy from a company that has your self-interest in mind and the collective self-interest and morality of the planet and people in mind. So that's something that we take very seriously and advocate for. And if you do that, the reward is the media picks up what you're doing. You don't have to necessarily tout your own horns. And you're actually creating a cycle where that NGO you're working with then gets more funding, where more people gain awareness from the initiative if it's a successful initiative. And we've done that with folks like Amazon Disaster Relief, Team Rubicon, React now. There's a lot of opportunity that we all have to help through the media. And it's not about, tooting your own horn. It's about doing the right thing. And if you do the right thing at the right time and solve problems when people need it, it will be noticed. Hopefully it will be emulated and you will have impact, and it will be natural. And as Stefan likes to say, authentic.
And Stefan, I think what's really interesting about Cotopaxi is you had so much experience in the developing world and making choices to have impact there, but then also keeping to that core and staying consistent and utilizing your impact for refugees here in the States, allowing you to look at both ends of the spectrum. And how has that served in, deepening the embodiment of your collaborations, your community context, and your brand as a whole?
Yeah. I think we try to treat impact with the same level of focus as we do any other aspect of our business, with the same level of strategic discipline as other aspects of our business. And, it comes back to our core value around people, right? We're building a brand around the basic belief that we can uplift and address sustainably the worst forms of poverty in the world and eradicate that during our lifetime. And so much progress has been made over the last 150 years, capitalism being a major force for that, with a lot of negative aspects too. But John, to your point earlier, I think we as a company and our consumers as stakeholders have a tremendous power, and there's a tremendous amount of progress that has been made. And that's what we have, in our bylaws and for us as our core value system have subscribed to. That's why we exist, is to sustainably alleviate poverty. And as we're planning our impact programs, the how, right? How do we execute on that? We try to be super, super diligent and say, okay, this is contributing to that large strategic vision, and these other initiatives that may pop up are not. That doesn't mean that we never respond to what's happening in the marketplace. We do have a small set of our funding is set aside for so-called community grants, where we do respond to crisis situations or specific situations that we want to help address. But the core of our impact program is very strategically planned in the long run, right? And we try to, and that I think goes back to the trust question that you asked before. We try to be very transparent about what we're planning to do, and then also be really transparent with how did we do. Just like we report, to our board, how did we do on sales and gross margin and everything else. Be very transparent with how are we doing on our impact. One important aspect here, I think, is that we try to not celebrate ourselves in that effort. Of course, we publish an impact report and we tell these stories around what our grantees have done with the money, but that is for us the focus, right? To really try to step back, have that humility to say it's not about us providing these grants. It's about the organizations on the ground that are doing the actual work that we try to celebrate, and these stories, right? These human stories that we're trying to tell. But that's, I think, how you can defend yourself against the maybe temptation to be super responsive to a crisis here, a natural disaster here, and be a little bit more a flag in the wind with your impact program, which can be problematic because then you don't have that long-term planning, you don't have the continuity in terms of resource provision. By having this really solid plan that's a long-term plan and that provides guardrails around what you do and what you don't do, what you say no to as well.
Mute button ran away. I'm that girl now. Sorry, team. And speaking of embarrassing moments, like being on mute when you're not supposed to, one of the things that in speaking with companies and, a lot of organizations are speaking about now is the fear of doing things wrong. A lot of people, state that not taking on an initiative or trying to make impact, there is a bit of trepidation right now about messing something up. The advice we like to give is as long as you're trying, you're not messing up, as long as you're doing it authentically. But what advice would you give about choosing a direction, standing by it, and how to alleviate that pressure that you're picking the wrong thing or you're doing something wrong? how do you guys combat that? And what advice would you give to your peers? Stefan, since you're still on, I'm just going to start that way and then move back this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it comes, I think, down to that concept of humility to know what you don't know, or to recognize that there's a lot that you don't know. And we were absolutely in that boat, still are to some extent. It's easy to want to do good, and we absolutely had the entrepreneurial passion to, okay, let's fix all these problems that we're seeing and throw a solution at it, an entrepreneurial solution. But that's not always in line with best practices with regard to corporate philanthropy. And it may not, unless you do a very careful needs assessment, the most impactful initiative. And so we recognized that, and very early, even before bringing in a senior marketer, a chief marketing officer, we brought in a chief impact officer in the early days, who was somebody who was very, very versed, incredibly skilled and talented, to help us set up an impact program that was following these practices. And obviously things have evolved, since then, but just having that recognition that if you don't know, then get some help from the outside. The other, and it doesn't mean that it needs to be a hire, right? There are amazing resources available in the market on a contractor basis that I think you can engage with. The other thing is to just, start small. You don't need to necessarily have to have this grandiose program. Long-term planning, yes, with a clear vision where you see your impact going, but starting with really small examples, engaging locally with your community, involving your employee base, leveraging your community and your customer base with very precise small projects, and then build on that success and learn and iterate in the process.
How about you, Ashley? You've been nodding your head.
So much of that resonated. Yeah, I think that deepening of analysis is really important. And when you don't know an answer, to find experts and to look to people who are living the problems to identify the solutions feels so important to me. I will say we have kind of some guiding questions that we've been using in philanthropy, but are developing for other parts of our business as well. But there's not a right answer to some of these questions, but to have the conversation can really help drive your decision making. And so for an example of that is that we did do emergency pandemic relief at the beginning of this year. That felt really important, and we did it locally. So we chose every place where we had brick and mortar location to make those investments, because if us spreading too thin won't have the impact, our intended impact. So thinking hyper locally, but then across the country and the United States and Canada, the places where Evo lives, works, and plays, like those are the places where we're making these deeper outdoor youth investments. And even in that process, creating these strategy screens. I feel like I had there was so much I was responding to, Stefan, but I think that there's a lot there around how are you engaging I think your whole teams as well. And so, we have the space and dollars set aside that are philanthropy budget, but also we're really wanting to engage our teams in the things that they're passionate about. So having programs that are matching gifts programs for your employees, the volunteer programs for your employees. We have a Dollars for Doers program. So when our employees are volunteering, make long-term commitments to organizations, the organizations start getting paid for our employees' time as well. So ways that we can create more buy-in to the culture of impact, I think those are some things that I've been thinking about a lot at Evo.
And one of the things that I find really interesting, and John, I know that you'll probably have an excellent answer to this, so I'm just going to throw this one right at you. We talk a lot about the philanthropy aspect, and we've talked a lot about embedding impact in a value chain, but not every instance or problem that needs to be solved can be solved community-wise, but is an internal question that you have to take to your own company, its own systems, its own, challenges, its, how you're operating as a company to solve problems like pay gaps, diversity, et cetera. There's the outward, and then there's the internal. And John, I know you guys think a lot about that in both spheres. So do you have any advice as to how to really maximize both the internal and external as a company and a leader?
Yeah, I mean, internally, we're lucky. We're in New York City. Sangha, our CEO, I mentioned before, loves to say at one point, I think we had 7 languages spoken in our office at one time. And diversity sort of follows media cycles right now. But diversity crosses everything, from mental challenges to social constructs to everything you can imagine. And, there might be one highlighted this month, one highlighted next. I think very important is to have sort of a wide hiring practice, to evaluate your fair practices in terms of pay. We do that every single year, even quarterly. To me, again, we're in Brooklyn. We're okay. Like, we are okay. I really want to stress that. The world is hurting right now. If I could jump back just for 1 second to what Stefan and Ashley were speaking about, I want to talk about fear and even, so the difference between, Cotopaxi has gotten to a level where they are a real corporation that has real depth and breadth. We're still small, and we're entrepreneurial in spirit, and we have a light, and we have, a light is sort of omnipresent. It's agnostic around the world. It's multi-purpose. We can really place that where it needs to be. So the one thing that I am, which many people need to be if you're going to have a startup, and earlier you said having a startup, founding a company is easy. It isn't, but it's atrocious. Don't do it. No. Work out for a while first and then do it, so you're ready for it. The idea is that, fear is paralyzing to people, and making mistakes is probably the best thing you can do if you want to start a company. If you're waiting for the perfect answer or the perfect target or the perfect cause, and I'm not at all countering what anyone has said here, including Stefan, at all, because once you get there, that's fantastic. But on your way, in those travels, that voyage that Ashley was talking about, you have to make mistakes. You have to be fearless. And then the reason you want to make a mistake, like if you sit there and you don't make a mistake, the meeting's over, you've spent 2 hours, no one knows anything, you haven't tried anything. When you make that mistake, you learn from it. And when you learn from it, it's everything that an MBA doesn't teach you. It's everything that can go wrong. That's what starting a company is. It's not learning what to do when everything's in a vacuum perfect, and this is how you do cash flow, and this is how you balance. No, it's when everything goes wrong, what do you do? And at that point, you make a decision. That's what you do. And either you make a mistake and learn from it. It's the hard lesson sometimes, right? Or you succeed and grow from it. And either way, that's so important. So fear cannot even be part of your language if you're going to start a company. Because, the early days were terrifying. Like terrifying. You're not even paying yourself. Nothing. You don't know how to live. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that translates so much to figuring out in anybody's line of work or life in deciding to make impact or be an activist that you're going to make a mistake and it's going to be scary. The key is to learn and to continue to grow and evolve. Ashley, you spoke so much about the journey. There's a lot that a lot of us don't know, and to be humble in that, and also to apologize when you mess up and acknowledge, absolutely everything that's come before, and accept that with grace and move forward, rather than worrying so much about
more important than language and apologies. Pardon my interruption. I apologize.
Right ahead.
Get up. I have a 3-year-old. I don't care if he falls. And I mean that as a father. I don't care. If he hurts himself horribly, okay. But I don't care if you fell. Get up. Don't come running over and crying if you're not hurt. Get up. Action is so much more important. I know there's such a focus on words right now. Action is so important. What is going to make the world better? What is going to make people safer? What is going to educate the population? That's what's important. And it's not about always, I said sorry, It's about changing your behavior, right? And training people to change their behavior. So that I'm not countering what you're saying, but I do think it's important. Get up. If you fall down, get up. No one's going to help you up. Get up. It's a tough world.
Well, you built on what I said, which is how collaboration works and how collaborating well actually creates more change and better conversations. So I appreciate you for that. Oh, there's so much I want to talk to you guys about. We have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to round robin on a couple of takeaways for everybody and give you a moment. I'm going to kick this to Ashley first, because you had a really beautiful saying in our prep panel about embodying values as an individual. My personal plug is a lot of people wait for people to give them the power that they already have to create impact or change. They can vote with their dollars. They can start having those conversations. I like to call them, the strategic chess match conversations that get you to an access point or a point to really create change. And for each of you, outside of having businesses and having community collaborations, you're each people. So is there something that you're currently embodying that is influencing everything, or learning that is driving you forward right now? Ashley, you want to start?
Yes. I think that, so there's a lot around, healing is nonlinear and iterative. And I think that the collective healing, collective liberation also requires individual healing and liberation. And so I have really been thinking more deeply lately about what is my personal commitment in this work, and how am I developing every single relationship? How is the relationships on my team, across departments, with the stranger on the street, with the neighbor in my building? How am I cultivating the kind of community and space that I want to live in, which is one that recognizes all of our inherent dignity and humanity, and is centered in love and radical love and self-acceptance? And so there's been so much important work that I've been doing on myself. And then actually bringing to work, which I understand makes people uncomfortable sometimes. And I do want to meet folks where they are.
Got a little time these days?
But yeah, how am I moving in a way that is creating, cultivating space that makes change and liberation a little bit easier around me?
Stefan?
Yeah. So when we set out with this business, we obviously had high hopes and aspirations for ourselves, but more so, we have high hopes that we will be able to positively influence people around us, people, organizations, other entrepreneurs. And there's a wonderful TED Talk by Derek Sievers where he talks about how to build a movement. And he uses the example of a music festival where this crazy shirtless guy is on the side of a hill and he's by himself going wild, like dancing, just himself. And then there's a second guy after a while that steps over and starts dancing with him. And little by little, and they're like not afraid to make absolute fools of themselves, right? But little by little, more and more people join in, and after a while, the entire hillside is dancing in this like crazy dance. And that's been our hope, right? To be, as an organization, the crazy person. And obviously there have been many before us, and there are already many that are dancing on the hill, but to contribute to that movement of organizations that dare to incorporate impact deeply into what they do, and to be a guide to others, because we genuinely are optimists. We believe in the good in people. The inauguration yesterday was, I think, such I know, controversial over many weeks, but like the one thing that really stood out for me was the poem by Amanda Gorlin, right? There's always light if we're only brave enough to see it and to be it. And I think that resonated so true to me personally, and to us as an organization, to be that light and to help others see that light. And I think it can be very, very small steps. Again, this doesn't have to be this massive program. It can be very, very small steps with individual partners that inspire others. One example, all our Canadian sales reps, for example, were loved during the sales meeting. We gave them the introduction of what we were doing, and they all sort of joined in, committing 1% of their commissions to our foundation. And there are plenty of examples like that. And so that's what we're hoping to do. That's what motivates me every single day to continue to build this business. Is not so much about ourselves, but the folks that we can rally around these causes.
John, take us home.
Well, I'll build now.
I love it. Collaboration.
Build. I mean, it's a great question at a time when, we're social beings. It's been a tough time for a lot of people right now. I think acknowledging that is important. And you can't do this sort of stuff alone. And so this is about, yes, creating a movement, but also giving thanks, recognizing that you're part of something bigger. Whether it's, one of our NGOs, our incredible staff. I mean, what the work our staff does every day is insane. To have 14 people impact 4 million lives is just something I never thought would be possible. They've gone remote. It's harder to deal with it. Your dog, your kid, your cat, your whatever, everything. If I turned my computer around right now, I mean, you lose your mind. What my house looks like, But I think it's essential to utilize the opportunity to work with others, to socialize. I mean, Stefan, Ashley, I've already reached out to both of you like twice. Like I'm politely persistent, if not annoying. But honestly, you don't do these things alone. You don't build alone. You take a company, you start something, an idea, and then you try to fill the room with people that are smarter. You work with organizations that are better. You know what you don't know. Like the things that have been said here are so true. But I think it's never more true now. I mean, what a great opportunity to reach out. Okay, so we're on Zoom or, you're making a phone call, but, be as social as you can about your idea, be fearless again, but get help. You don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Once you think you know everything, you're done. Your cup needs to be 1/8 full at all times on everything, including my 3-year-old who teaches me things every single day. Some of them I don't want to know about myself, Anyway, so that would be how I would take us home. I appreciate this social event, all the people that listened, your organization, all 3 organizations. I'm just grateful to be a part of the whole, of a community like Outdoor Community, and organizations that are not just here to make a profit, that have a soul.
See, I knew you could take us home. So as we only have 3 minutes left, I just want to thank everyone for coming here, coming together, collaborating with us. I hope this is the beginning of your thinking on these ideas and processes and potential community engagement opportunities and ways to make change. Just remember, you don't need to ask for permission for power you already have. And a lot of people are looking to build with you to create something different and likely profitable. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing all the impact that everyone in this industry is going to be continuing to do over the next couple of years and for the rest of our lives. All right. Bye, everybody.